The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace grounds as Catherine stood by the tall windows of their private sitting room. Her fingers traced the cool glass while she watched William in the garden below, playing with their children. George was chasing Charlotte around the old oak tree while little Louis tottered after them, his laughter carrying on the gentle breeze. William's voice drifted up as he called out encouragement, his sleeves rolled up, looking more like any ordinary. Farther than the future King of England. Catherine's heart squeezed with a familiar ache. These moments were becoming more precious, more fragile, as the weight of duty pressed heavier on their shoulders. The official announcement wouldn't come for another week, but they both knew what lay ahead. William would need to leave for an extended tours of the Commonwealth realms, a journey that would take him away from home for nearly 3 months. It was the longest separation they would face since their early marriage, and the thought of it sat like a stone in Catherine's chest. She turned away from the window as William's footsteps echoed in the hallway. He appeared in the doorway, his hair tousled from playing with the children, a genuine smile lighting his face. But Catherine knew him well enough to see the shadow behind his eyes, the same weight she carried in her own heart. "They're asking for their mother now," William said softly, crossing the room to stand beside her. "Something about needing someone who can properly braid Charlotte's hair for her doll." Catherine managed to smile. "I suppose fathers have their limitations." William's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. They stood in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts. The palace around them hummed with its usual activity, staff members going about their duties, but in this moment they felt utterly alone together. "You should tell them soon," Catherine whispered, though the words felt like glass in her throat. William nodded slowly. "I keep thinking about what George will say. He's been so excited about that cricket match in June. I promised I'd teach him that new bowling technique." "He'll understand," Catherine said, though she wasn't entirely convinced herself. At 10, George was beginning to grasp the weight of his future role. But he was still a child who wanted his father present for the important moments. They had navigated separations before, of course. William's military service, official duties, and royal obligations had created gaps in their time together throughout their marriage. But this felt different. The world seemed more uncertain now, the pressures on the monarchy more intense, and their children were at ages where every moment felt crucial. William lifted their joined hands, pressed a gentle kiss to Catherine's. "Knuckles, I spoke with my father yesterday," he said quietly. "He understands the difficulty, but the timing is critical. The Commonwealth leaders specifically requested this tour now, with everything that's been happening globally." Catherine knew he was right. The political landscape had shifted dramatically over the past year, and the royal family's role as a stabilizing presence had never been more important. Still, knowing the necessity didn't make the prospect any easier. "Charlotte asked me yesterday why you sometimes look sad," Catherine said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know how to answer her. She's so perceptive, just like her father." William's arm slipped around Catherine's waist, pulling her closer. "What did you tell her?" "That sometimes grown-ups have big feelings about important things, and that it's okay to feel sad sometimes." She nodded very seriously, and then asked if she could draw me a picture to make me feel better. They both smiled at that. The image of their 6-year-old daughter with her tongue poking out in concentration as she wielded her colored pencils. Charlotte had inherited Catherine's artistic eye and William's determination, creating elaborate drawings that she presented with great ceremony. "She drew you a crown made of flowers," Catherine continued, "with little birds sitting on top. Said it was a happy crown because flowers and birds are always cheerful." William chuckled softly. "She's going to be a remarkable woman someday." "She already is," Catherine replied, then grew quiet again. "I worry about how they'll handle the separation. Louis is so young, and he's been so attached to you lately." It was true. Their youngest, now 3, had developed a particular fondness for his father's bedtime stories and insisted on William's presence for his evening routine. The thought of explaining why Papa wouldn't be there for months felt overwhelming. William was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on Catherine's hand. "I've been thinking," he said finally. What if we approach this differently? Instead of focusing on the separation, we could frame it as an adventure we're all part of. I could send them letters from each country, pictures, little souvenirs, make them feel included in the journey. Catherine looked up at him, seeing the careful hope in his expression. You mean like a family project, even while apart? Exactly. We could get them a map, mark all the places I'll visit. They could learn about each country, maybe cook traditional foods from those places with you. Charlotte could illustrate the letters I send. The idea began to take shape in Catherine's mind, and she felt a small spark of optimism. George would love tracking your progress. You know how he loves geography? Louis could help choose which photos to send back. He has such definite opinions about pictures. They stood together, planning ways to bridge the distance that would soon separate them. It wouldn't eliminate the pain of parting, but it might transform it into something more bearable, more connected. The afternoon sun had shifted, casting new patterns of light across the room. Soon, they would need to join the world again, to step back into their roles as representatives of the crown. But for now, they held on to this quiet moment, storing up the warmth of simply being William and Catherine, husband and wife, parents, worried about their children and missing each other before they were even apart outside. They could hear their children's voices calling for them, ready for tea and stories and the comfortable routines that made up their family life. These simple moments would be what William would miss most during the long months ahead, and what Catherine would hold closest to her heart until his return. The farewell hadn't come yet, but already they were learning how to love across the distance that duty would demand. The days that followed blurred together in a rush of preparations and stolen moments. Catherine found herself watching William more intently, memorizing the way he laughed at George's jokes during breakfast, how he patiently helped Charlotte with her reading, and the gentle way he rocked Louis to sleep each night. She was creating a library of memories to sustain her through the coming months. William seemed to be doing the same. She caught him lingering in doorways, his eyes following her as she moved through their daily routines. During a quiet dinner, after the children had gone to bed, he suddenly reached across the table and took her hand. "I want to remember this," he said simply. "The way the candlelight catches in your hair, the sound of your laugh when George told that terrible joke about the elephant. All of it." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. "We're being rather sentimental. Aren't we, perhaps?" William smiled. "But I think we're allowed." The official announcement came on a Tuesday morning. Catherine sat beside William in his study as he made the necessary phone calls to family members, ensuring they heard the news directly before it reached the media. His mother was understanding but concerned, offering to spend more time with the children during his absence. His father, as expected, was proud but practical, discussing the political importance of the tour with quiet satisfaction. The hardest call was to Catherine's parents. Her mother's voice grew soft with concern, and Catherine could picture her father's worried expression in the background. They had always been William's strongest supporters, but they also understood the unique challenges their daughter faced as a royal wife and mother. "We'll be fine, ma'am," Catherine assured her, though the words felt hollow. "The children and I will have plenty to keep us busy." After the calls, they sat in comfortable silence. William's study had always been Catherine's favorite room in their private quarters. It was here that he wrestled with difficult decisions, wrote important speeches, and planned for the future of the monarchy. The walls were lined with books, family photos, and a few of Charlotte's drawings that he'd framed. It felt like the heart of their family life, removed from the grandeur and ceremony that defined so much of their public existence. "I've been thinking about what you said," Catherine said eventually.
What?
"About making this an adventure for the children. I spoke with their teachers today about incorporating your travels into their lessons." William's face brightened. "What did they suggest?" "George's history teacher is excited about connecting his curriculum to the country's Yule visit. Charlotte's art instructor wants her to create a visual diary of your journey based on your letters. And Louis Nursery School is planning too. Learn songs and games from different cultures." "It's perfect," William said, genuine enthusiasm in his voice. "I can coordinate with the embassy staff to send authentic materials, maybe even arrange video calls when the time zones align." They spent the next hour planning the logistics, turning their separation into a family project that would unite them across continents. It was easier to focus on the practical details than to dwell on the emotional reality of 3 months apart. That evening, it told the children together. They had chosen William's study for the conversation, hoping the familiar, comfortable setting would help ease any anxiety. George, as they had expected, was the most vocal in his response. "But Dad, you promised to help me with cricket," he said, his voice carrying the weight of profound disappointment. "I know, and I wish I could be here for that," William replied, kneeling to meet his son's eyes. "But remember what we've talked about regarding duty and service? This tour is important for our country and the Commonwealth. It's part of what our family does to help others." George nodded slowly, his young face serious. Catherine could see him processing the information, weighing his personal disappointment against the larger concepts. They had been teaching him about responsibility and service. Charlotte surprised them with her response. "Will you send me postcards? Like Granny and Grandpa do when they travel?" "Even better," William promised. "I'll send you letters with drawings and photos. Maybe you can draw pictures back to me." Charlotte's eyes lit up at this prospect. She had recently discovered a love for correspondence after exchanging letters with her cousin, and the idea of international mail clearly appealed to her imagination. Louis, at 3, was the most confused by the announcement. He climbed onto William's lap and patted his father's cheek with his small hand. "Papa, stay," he said simply. William's voice was thick with emotion as he responded. "Papa has to go away for work, little one. But I'll come back, and while I'm gone, you can help Mama take care of everyone." The weight of that moment settled on them all. This wasn't just about William's absence. It would fundamentally change the family dynamic for months. Catherine would be managing 3 children royal duties and her own emotional needs without her closest partner and support. After the children were settled for the night, William and Catherine returned to their sitting room. The fire crackled softly in the grate, and the familiar sounds of the palace settling for the evening surrounded them. "I keep thinking I should feel more prepared," Catherine said, curling up beside William on the sofa. "We've known this was coming. We've made plans, but I still feel like there's something I'm forgetting." William pulled her closer, his chin resting on top of her head. "I don't think anything can truly prepare us for this. We'll figure it out as we go, the way we always do." They talked late into the night, covering everything from practical concerns about the children's schedules to deeper worries about maintaining their connection across such distance and time. William would be crossing multiple time zones, often with only brief windows for communication. Catherine would be managing not just their family but also her own royal duties and public appearances. "Promise me something," Catherine said as they finally prepared for bed. "Anything. Don't try to be the perfect royal on this tour. I know the pressure will be enormous, but remember to be yourself. Send me the real updates, not just the official ones. Tell me about the small moments, the unexpected conversations, the things that make you laugh." William paused in the doorway of their bathroom, toothbrush in hand. "You're worried I'll disappear into the role?" Catherine nodded. "Such a long time, and there will be so many people advising you, managing your schedule, shaping your responses. I just want to make sure I still recognize my husband when you come home." William set down his toothbrush and crossed back to her, taking her face gently in his hands. "Catherine, love, I could travel to the ends of the earth, meet with 1,000 officials, give 100 speeches, and at the end of every day, I would still be the man who loves you more than anything in this world. That will never change." The certainty in his voice steadied her, and she leaned into his touch. Tomorrow would bring another day of preparations, another step closer to their goodbye. But tonight, they were still together, still whole, still the team they had always been. The final week arrived with startling swiftness. Catherine woke each morning with a growing sense of urgency, as if time itself was slipping through her fingers like water. The palace staff moved with heightened efficiency, finalizing travel arrangements, confirming security details, and ensuring every aspect of William's tour was perfectly coordinated. Yet beneath all the professional activity, Catherine sensed the same melancholy that had settled over her own heart. Even their longtime protection officers seemed more subdued than usual. Detective Inspector Matthews, who had been with their family for nearly 5 years, approached Catherine privately on Thursday morning. "Your Royal Highness," he said with unusual formality, "I wanted to assure you that while His Royal Highness is away, our security arrangements here will be seamless. You won't notice any changes in your daily routines." Catherine appreciated his concern, but it highlighted another aspect of the separation she hadn't fully considered. The intricate web of people who supported their family would be divided, with William taking a full security detail while she maintained her own team. Even their closest staff members would be affected by this temporary fracture in their family unit. William had begun the process of saying goodbye to people and places. Catherine found him in the garden on Thursday afternoon, standing beneath the oak tree where they had spent so many family moments. His hands were clasped behind his back, and his expression was distant, contemplative. "Penny for your thoughts?" Catherine said softly, joining him on the weathered garden bench. "I was just thinking about all the conversations we've had under this tree," William replied. "Do you remember when George took his first steps right here? Charlotte was so excited she started crying, and Louis wasn't even born yet." Catherine smiled at the memory. Charlotte was convinced she had taught him to walk through sheer willpower. She kept clapping and shouting again, until George got overwhelmed and sat down. They sat in comfortable silence, surrounded by the garden that had witnessed so many milestones in their family's life. The roses Catherine had planted during her first year of marriage were now full and mature, climbing the stone walls with abundant blooms. The children's play area bore the gentle wear of countless hours of imagination and laughter. "I've written letters for each of them," William said eventually, "to be opened while I'm away. Birthdays, difficult days, moments when they might need something from me that can't wait for a phone call." Catherine felt her throat tighten. "That's beautiful, William. What did you write?" "For George, I tried to capture the conversations we might have had about growing up, about handling responsibility when it feels too heavy. For Charlotte, I wrote about creativity and kindness, about staying curious about the world. And for Louis," William paused, his voice growing thick, "I wrote about how proud I am to be his father, how his joy reminds me what's truly important." Catherine reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. "They're lucky to have you as their father. I hope they still feel that way." "When I return," William said quietly, 3 months is so long in a child's life. Louis might not even remember me clearly by the time I get back." "Don't underestimate them," Catherine said firmly. "They understand more than we sometimes give them credit for. And besides, we're going to make sure you're part of their daily lives, even from thousands of miles away." That evening, they shared what they privately called their Last Supper as a complete family. Catherine had requested their cook prepare everyone's favorite dishes, creating a meal that was more celebration than farewell dinner. George had asked for shepherd's pie, Charlotte wanted pasta with the special cream sauce, and Louis predictably requested the orange vegetables, his term for carrots prepared in any fashion. William looked around the table as they ate, his eyes taking in each beloved face. Charlotte was telling an elaborate story about her imaginary horse, complete with dramatic gestures that occasionally threatened her water glass. George was listening with the patient indulgence of an older brother, while Louis attempted to feed bits of his carrots to his stuffed elephant, which sat propped in its own chair beside him. "This," William said suddenly, causing everyone to look at him, "this is what I'll miss most. Not the big occasions or the formal events, but Tuesday night dinners with orange vegetables and stories about magical horses." Charlotte beamed at having her story referenced, while George nodded seriously. "Could record our dinner conversations for you, Dad, like a family podcast." Catherine felt a surge of pride at her eldest son's thoughtfulness. "That's a wonderful idea, George. We could make it our weekly tradition." After dinner, they moved to the sitting room for their final family evening together. William had suggested they watch a film, but instead they found themselves talking, sharing memories and making plans for his return. Charlotte curled up against William's side, while George sat on the floor by his father's feet. Louis moved between his parents' laps, too energetic to settle in one place for long. "Tell us about the first place you're going," Charlotte requested. William launched into a description of Australia, painting pictures with his words of kangaroos and koalas, of Sydney Harbor and the Great Barrier Reef. The children listened with rapt attention, and Catherine found herself equally captivated. Not by the destinations themselves, but by the enthusiasm in her husband's voice. Despite his sadness about leaving, she could see his genuine excitement about the work he would be doing. "Will you swim with the fish?" Louis asked solemnly. "But I'll take lots of pictures of the fish for you." As the evening wound down, they followed their usual bedtime routine, but everything felt weighted with significance. William read to each child individually, lingering over the familiar stories, his voice gentle and unhurried. Catherine found herself memorizing these moments too. The way Charlotte's eyes grew heavy as her father read her favorite fairy tale. How George leaned against William's shoulder during their chapter of adventure stories, and Louis's sleepy giggles at the funny voices William created for different characters. After the children were asleep, William and Catherine returned to their own room. The suitcases packed and waiting by the door served as a stark reminder that morning would bring there. Goodbye. Catherine sat at her dressing table, going through her evening routine while William prepared for bed. In the mirror, she could see him moving about their room, touching familiar objects as if committing them to memory. He paused at the photograph on his nightstand, a candid shot of their family from their last vacation, all of them windswept and laughing on a beach in Scotland. "I'll keep this with me," he said, lifting the frame. "Take this too," Catherine said, removing a small locket from her jewelry box. It contained tiny photographs of each of their children, and she had worn it to several important events over the years. "I know it's not very masculine, but ... William took the locket gently, examining the delicate engravings on its surface. "It's perfect. I'll keep it with me always." They prepared for bed in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts. As they settled under the covers, Catherine moved naturally into the circle of William's arms, her head resting on his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and familiar, and tried to imprint the sound in her memory. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," William replied, his lips pressing gently against her hair. More than words can say. They held each other close, neither wanting to sleep and lose these final hours together, yet knowing that morning would come, whether they were ready or not. Outside their window, London slept on, unaware that within the palace walls, a family was preparing to say the most difficult goodbye of their lives. The morning arrived gray and drizzly, as if the weather itself reflected the mood within the palace walls. Catherine woke before dawn, immediately aware of the empty space beside her where William should have been. She found him standing by the window, already dressed in his travel clothes, watching the rain streak down the glass. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked softly, joining him at the window. William shook his head. "I kept thinking about everything I wanted to tell you, all the things I might forget to say before I leave." Catherine slipped her arms around his waist from behind, resting her cheek against his back. "We have time. The children won't be awake for another hour." They stood together in the quiet of early morning, London slowly awakening beyond their window. The familiar sounds of the palace staff beginning their daily routines drifted through the walls, the soft footsteps in the corridors, the distant murmur of voices, the gentle clatter of morning tea service being prepared. "I've been thinking," William said, turning in Catherine's arms to face her, "about what you said regarding staying connected to who I am. I want you to promise me something too." "What's that?" "Don't try to be everything to everyone while I'm gone. I know you'll want to fill the gap I'm leaving, to be both mother and father to the children, to manage every detail perfectly, but remember that it's okay to ask for help, to lean on your parents, to let the children see that you miss me too." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. It was so typical of William to think of her needs even as he prepared to leave. "I promise," she whispered, "though you know how stubborn I can be about accepting help." "One of your most endearing and frustrating qualities," William smiled, cupping her face gently. "Right alongside your terrible sense of direction and your inability to choose a restaurant without asking for my opinion." Catherine laughed despite her tears. "I'll have to make a lot of dining decisions on my own now. The children might end up eating toast for dinner more often than you'd approve of. They'll survive, William assured her. If they don't, at least they'll have interesting stories to tell about the time Mama fed them breakfast for dinner. 3 nights in a row, sound of small footsteps in the hallway interrupted their quiet conversation. Charlotte appeared in the doorway, her hair tousled from sleep, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. "Is it time for Papa to go?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. William knelt down and opened his arms, and Charlotte ran to him, burying her face against his shoulder. "Not quite yet, sweetheart. We still have breakfast together." Soon George and Louis joined them, and the family made their way to the private dining room for their final meal together. The children were unusually quiet, even Louis, who typically chattered constantly during breakfast.
Oh.
They seemed to sense the significance of the moment, though they couldn't fully understand it. William made an effort to keep the conversation light, asking about their plans for the day and reminding them about the map they would use to track his journey. But Catherine could see the strain in his expression, the way he kept glancing at his watch as departure time approached. "I have something for each of you," William said when they had finished eating. He produced 3 wrapped packages from beside his chair. "These are for while I'm away." George unwrapped his gift to find a leather-bound journal with his initials embossed on the cover. "For writing down your thoughts and experiences while I'm gone," William explained. "Maybe you could share some of them with me in your letters." Charlotte gasped with delight at her present, a set of watercolor paints in a beautiful wooden box. "For painting all the places I tell you about," William said. "I can't wait to see the world through your eyes." Louis's gift was a small stuffed kangaroo, soft and cuddly, with a pouch that contained a tiny version of William's official photograph. "This is Hopscotch," William told his youngest son. "He's going to keep you company and remind you that Papa loves you very much." The children were thrilled with their gifts, but Catherine could see that the reality of their father's departure was beginning to sink in. George's eyes were bright with unshed tears, and Charlotte kept touching her paint box as if it might disappear. The car arrived too soon, its sleek black exterior gleaming despite the overcast sky. Catherine's heart began to race as she realized their private goodbye was coming to an end. Soon William would step into his public role, surrounded by officials and security, and she would lose these last precious moments of intimacy. The family walked together to the main entrance, where William's protection team waited respectfully at a distance. The children clustered around their father for final hugs, each goodbye heartbreaking in its own way. George stood straight and tried to be brave, shaking his father's hand formally before dissolving into tears and wrapping his arms around William's waist. "I'll take care of everyone while you're gone, Dad," he managed through his sobs. Charlotte clung to William's neck, whispering secrets in his ear that made him smile even as his own eyes filled with tears. She made him promise to think of her whenever he saw something beautiful. He solemnly agreed. Louis, too young to fully understand, but old enough to sense the sadness around him, kept patting William's face and saying, "Papa, come back," in his serious little voice. Finally, it was Catherine's turn. The children stepped back, somehow understanding that their parents needed a moment alone. William took Catherine's hands in his, studying her face as if memorizing every detail. "I don't know how to do this," Catherine whispered, her voice breaking. "Neither do I," William admitted. "But we'll figure it out, the way we always do." Pulled her close, and they held each other tightly, neither caring about the staff members who politely looked away or the photographers who might be waiting outside the palace gates. In that moment, they were simply a husband and wife facing a difficult goodbye. "I love you, William," murmured against her hair. "Love our life, our children, our ridiculous arguments about the thermostat, and your insistence on rearranging the furniture every few months. I love all of it, and I'll carry it with me every day." Catherine couldn't speak past the lump in her throat, so she simply held him tighter, trying to memorize the feel of his arms around her, the scent of his cologne, the sound of his heartbeat. Beneath her ear, when they finally separated, both were crying openly. William kissed her gently, a soft press of lips that held years of love and the promise of reunion. "Take care of yourself," he said. "Write to me about everything, the children's new words, the garden, your terrible attempts at cooking dinner. I want to know all of it." "Come home to us," Catherine replied simply. William nodded, unable to trust his voice, kissed each child one more time, then walked toward the waiting car. At the door, he turned back for one final look at his family, Catherine with her arms around their 3 children, all of them watching him with love and sadness in their eyes. The car door closed with a soft click, and William was gone, leaving behind only the echo of engine noise and the scent of rain on pavement. Catherine and the children stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching until the car disappeared through the palace gates. "When will Papa come home?" Louis asked, his small hand finding Catherine's. "In 3 months, darling," Catherine said, her voice steady despite her tears. "But until then, we're going to have our own adventures, aren't we?" The children nodded solemnly, and together they turned back into the palace, beginning the long journey of learning how to be a family, temporarily divided by distance, but forever united by love. The first week after William's departure passed in a blur of adjustments and quiet, moments of grief that Catherine hadn't expected. The palace felt different without his presence, not empty exactly, but somehow off balance, like a symphony missing its lead violin. The children felt it too, though each expressed it in their own way. George threw himself into his studies with unusual intensity, as if academic achievement could somehow bridge the distance to his father. He spent hours working on the journal William had given him, writing detailed entries about his daily activities that he planned to share in his letters. Catherine found him one evening at his desk, razor shavings scattered around him as he rewrote the same paragraph for the 3rd time. "It has to be perfect," he explained, when Catherine gently suggested he might be working too hard. "Dad will want to know everything, and I don't want to forget anything important." Charlotte responded to her father's absence by becoming unusually clingy with Catherine. She wanted to help with everything, setting the table, choosing her brothers' clothes, even assisting with royal correspondence. Her watercolor set remained unopened on her desk, too precious to use until the perfect moment arrived. "I'm saving them for when Papa sends his first letter," she explained seriously, "and I'll know exactly what colors to use." Louis, perhaps, because of his age, seemed the least affected initially. He carried his stuffed kangaroo everywhere and would occasionally ask for Papa phone, but otherwise maintained his cheerful disposition. It was only at bedtime that Catherine noticed the change. He would clutch hopscotch tightly and ask for extra stories, as if trying to fill the space William's bedtime routine had left behind. Catherine herself struggled with the practical realities of single parenting alongside her royal duties. The morning routine that had once been shared between 2 parents now fell entirely on her shoulders. She found herself running late more often, forgetting small details, and feeling overwhelmed by decisions that had once been made collaboratively. Her mother appeared at the palace on the 4th day, armed with homemade scones and an understanding smile. "I thought you might need some company," Carol Middleton said simply, and Catherine nearly cried with relief at having another adult presence in the house. "I keep expecting him to walk through the door," Catherine confessed as they sat in the garden while the children played. "Yesterday, I found myself setting out to coffee cups at breakfast, and Louis asked why Papa's cup was there when Papa was on the airplane." Carol nodded sympathetically. "It's perfectly normal to feel off-kilter when your father used to travel. For work, I would find myself cooking portions for 4 when there were only 3 of us at home. The heart takes time to adjust to absence." The first letter from William arrived on day 6, addressed to the whole family, but written in his unmistakable handwriting. Catherine gathered the children in the sitting room to read it together, her hands trembling slightly as she opened the envelope. "My dearest family," she read aloud. "I'm writing this from Sydney, where it's tomorrow morning while you're having yesterday's dinner. The time difference is going to take some getting used to, but it means I'm living in your future, which makes me feel closer to home somehow." The letter was warm and detailed, filled with descriptions of the people he'd met, the food he'd tried, and the sights he'd seen. But it was the personal touches that made the children lean forward with excitement. How he'd seen a street performer who reminded him of Charlotte's dramatic storytelling, a cricket match that made him think of George, and a little boy in the crowd who had Louis's exact smile. "I miss our morning chaos," William had written. "The way Charlotte always forgets her school bag until the last minute. How George insists on explaining the weather forecast to everyone at breakfast.
And the way Louis tries to feed his cereal to whichever stuffed animal is his favorite that week?
Catherine, I miss your terrible singing in the shower and the way you always steal my coffee when you think I'm not looking. The children giggled at these observations, and Catherine felt her heart squeeze with love and longing. He was keeping his promise to share the real moments, and not just the official updates. Charlotte immediately ran to get her watercolor set, finally ready to begin her artistic response. I'm going to paint Sydney Harbor, she announced. With lots of blue for the water and white for the famous bridge. George was already planning his response letter, asking Catherine for help with the proper way to address his father formally. Versus personally, should I write, Dear Dad, or Your Royal Highness? He wondered aloud. Just write from your heart, Catherine advised. He's your father first, everything else second. That evening, Catherine sat alone in their bedroom, holding her own letter from William, a separate, private note that had been tucked inside the family letter. His words were intimate and honest, describing not just the official events but his loneliness. His worries about missing important moments with the children and his deep love for her. I dream about home every night, he had written.
At the
Palace or the formal rooms, but our private spaces. The way you look when you're reading in bed, how you unconsciously reach for my hand when we're walking. The sound of your laugh when one of the children says something unexpectedly wise. I'm counting the days until I can hold you again. Catherine pressed the letter to her heart, feeling both comforted and aching. The written words were precious, but they couldn't replace his physical presence. The warmth of his arms around her, or the partnership they had built over the years of marriage. The second week brought new challenges. Charlotte came down with a mild fever that would have been easily managed with both parents present. But Catherine found herself second-guessing every decision. Should she call the doctor immediately? Was it serious enough to interrupt William's schedule with a worried phone call? The weight of making these decisions alone felt enormous. Her mother stayed overnight to help. Catherine was grateful for the support. You're doing beautifully, Carol assured her as they sat beside Charlotte's bed, monitoring her temperature. William chose well when he married someone so capable and loving. I don't feel capable, Catherine admitted. I feel like I'm barely keeping everything together. That's what being a parent feels like most of the time, Carol smiled.
What's that?
The fact that you care so much about doing it right shows you're exactly the mother your children need. Charlotte recovered quickly, but the experience reminded Catherine how much she had relied on William's partnership in their daily life.
Nice.
They'd been a team for so long that operating independently felt foreign and exhausting. The third week brought their first video call with William. The technology was sometimes glitchy, with delays and frozen images, but seeing his face on the screen felt like receiving oxygen after holding her breath. The children crowded around the laptop, all talking at once, eager to show him their projects. And share their news, Papa. Look. Louis held up his kangaroo. Hopscotch learned to jump. William's image froze for a moment, then came back with his face creased in a smile. That's wonderful, Louis. Has he been taking good care of you? Yes, and he sleeps in my bed and helps me eat breakfast, Louis reported seriously. George showed his father the map where they had been tracking the tour, pointing to each location with pride. You'll be in New Zealand next week, and then Fiji. Did you know Fiji has more than 300 islands? I did know that, William replied, his voice warm despite the digital distortion. Maybe you can help me learn some interesting facts about each place before I arrive. Charlotte had prepared a small art gallery on the coffee table, displaying all the paintings she had created inspired by William's letters. She held up each one to the camera, explaining her artistic choices with the seriousness of a professional. Curator, this one is the sunset you described in Melbourne, she said, showing a vibrant wash of orange and pink. And this is the bird you saw that reminded you of our robin at home, except I made it more colorful because Australian birds are more exciting. When it was Catherine's turn to speak privately with William, the children reluctantly left the room, though Charlotte lingered by the door until Catherine gently encouraged her to give them some privacy. You look tired, William said, his concern evident even through the screen. You look thin, Catherine replied. Are you eating properly? They both laughed at how quickly they had fallen into their familiar pattern of caring for each other. Fine, William assured her. The food is wonderful, actually. But I miss our dinners together. These official meals are so formal, so performative. I find myself wishing I could just sit at our kitchen table and listen to you tell me about your day. Charlotte had her first loose tooth yesterday, Catherine said. She's been wiggling it, constantly hoping it will fall out before you return, so she can put it under her pillow and tell you about the tooth fairy's visit. Record everything, William said urgently. I know it's extra work, but please, I don't want to miss these moments entirely. I will, Catherine promised. George has been keeping detailed notes in his journal, and Charlotte wants to create a scrapbook. Even Louis has been posing for photos with hopscotch in different locations around the palace. They talked until the connection became too unstable to continue, but even the brief contact recharged Catherine's spirits. Seeing William's face, hearing his voice in real time rather than through letters, reminded her that this separation was temporary, that their love remained constant across any distance. After the call, Catherine tucked the children into bed with a lighter heart than she had felt since William's departure. They were adapting, all of them, learning to maintain their family bonds despite the physical separation. It wasn't the same as being together, but it was something precious in its own right. Proof of the strength of their love and their commitment to each other as she settled into bed that night. Catherine looked at the photograph on William's nightstand, then at her phone, where she had screenshots from their video call. They were making it work, day by day, moment by moment. The ache of missing him hadn't diminished, but alongside it grew a quiet pride in their resilience, in their ability to love each other across continents and time zones. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new moments to navigate alone. But tonight, she felt connected to her husband and confident in her ability to care for their children until the family was whole again. The weeks that followed established a new rhythm for their separated family. Catherine had learned to navigate the daily challenges of single parenting while maintaining her royal duties, though some days felt more successful than others. The children had adapted remarkably well, finding comfort in their routines of letter writing, map updating, video calls with their father. By the 6th week, Schley had created an impressive collection of watercolor paintings inspired by William's journey. Her technique had improved noticeably, and she had developed her own artistic interpretation of each country he visited. The palace staff had begun to look forward to her latest creations, often stopping by to admire her work and offer gentle praise. George had filled nearly half of his journal with detailed observations about life without his father. His entries revealed a maturity that sometimes surprised Catherine, as he wrote thoughtfully about responsibility, family bonds, and the importance of service to others. His letters to William had become lengthy compositions that read like diplomatic correspondence mixed with the genuine voice of a 10-year-old boy. Louis had perhaps made the most touching adaptation. He had begun conducting elaborate conversations with his stuffed kangaroo, Hopscotch, treating the toy as a direct line of communication to his father. Catherine often overheard him sharing his daily experiences with the kangaroo, asking for advice, and even scolding Hopscotch when he felt the toy wasn't paying proper attention. Hopscotch says Papa is coming home soon, Louis announced one morning at breakfast, holding the kangaroo up to his ear as if receiving an important message. What else does Hopscotch say? Catherine asked, playing along with the game that had become such a source of comfort for her youngest child. He says Papa misses my good morning hugs and Charlotte's singing and George's smart questions, Louis reported solemnly. And he says Papa thinks about Mama's pretty smile every day. Catherine's heart melted at this innocent wisdom. Through his connection with Hopscotch, Louis was processing his father's absence and maintaining their bond in the most natural way possible for a 3-year-old. The turning point came during the 8th week, when William called with unexpected news. A political situation had developed that required him to extend his tour by an additional 2 weeks. Catherine took the call privately in William's study, closing the door to ensure the children wouldn't overhear. I'm so sorry, William said, his voice heavy with exhaustion and frustration. The Prime Minister feels it's crucial for me to remain here while the negotiations are ongoing. My presence apparently provides some stability to the diplomatic process. Catherine felt her carefully maintained composure begin to crack. They had been counting down to his return, planning special meals and activities for his homecoming.
Hey.
Children had been marking off days on their calendar with growing excitement. How do I tell them? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. They've been so good about this, so patient and understanding. But 2 more weeks feels impossible right now. I know, William said, and she could hear tears in his voice. I've asked about alternatives, about whether someone else could handle the remaining obligations, but the answer is always the same. It has to be me. Catherine closed her eyes, drawing on reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. This was the reality of their life. Duty sometimes demanded sacrifices. That felt unbearable, but they had to find ways to bear them anyway. We'll manage, she said finally. We always do. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. When you do come home, take time to just be with us. Not the official homecoming, not the ceremonies or press opportunities. Just our family. Together with nowhere else to be. I promise, William said immediately. The first week I'm back belongs entirely to us. That evening, Catherine gathered the children to share the news about the extension. She had prepared herself for tears, protests, or anger. But their responses surprised her. George nodded seriously, as if he had been expecting this possibility. Important work takes time, he said, echoing something William had told him months earlier. Dad wouldn't stay away longer unless it really mattered. Charlotte's lower lip trembled, but she squared her shoulders with determination. I'll paint him to more countries then, she declared. And I'll make them extra beautiful, so he knows we're still thinking about him. Louis looked confused by the concept of 2 more weeks, but when Catherine explained that it meant more time to practice his letters to Papa and teach hopscotch new tricks, he seemed satisfied with the arrangement. Their resilience humbled Catherine and reminded her of the strength that ran through their family. They'd been shaped by duty and service, but at their core, they were bound by love that could withstand any challenge. The final 4 weeks passed more quickly than Catherine had expected. Perhaps because they had already adjusted to the separation, the extension felt less daunting than the original departure. The children continued their projects with renewed enthusiasm. Catherine found herself appreciating the independence she had developed during William's absence. She had learned to trust her instincts as a parent, to make decisions confidently, and to find joy in the unique dynamics that emerged when she was the sole focus of the children's attention. Their bedtime conversations had become deeper and more intimate, and she had discovered new aspects of each child's personality that might have remained hidden in the busier dynamic of 2-parent evenings. 2 days before William's return, stood in their bedroom, preparing for his homecoming. The room looked exactly as it had when he left, except for the small changes that had accumulated over the months. Charlotte's latest painting sat framed on Catherine's nightstand, a watercolor. Of the 4 of them together, under their garden oak tree, George had left his completed journal on William's side of the bed, ready to share every detail of their time apart. And Louis had carefully arranged a collection of toys and books that he wanted to show his father immediately upon his return. Catherine had changed too, though the transformations were less visible. She had discovered reserves of strength and capability that she hadn't known she possessed. The lonely nights had been difficult, but they had also taught her to appreciate her own company, to find peace in solitude, and to value the partnership she shared with William even more deeply. On the morning of William's return, the entire family gathered in the same entrance hall where they had said goodbye 3.5 months earlier. The children were practically vibrating with excitement, clutching their gifts and projects, ready to overwhelm their father with months of accumulated love and experiences. Catherine smoothed George's hair and adjusted Charlotte's dress, then picked up Louis, who was too excited to stand still. Remember, she told them, Papa might be very tired from his long flight. Let's give him a moment to get used to being home before we share everything at once. The sound of car engines in the courtyard made them all freeze with anticipation. Catherine's heart began to race as she realized that in moments, their long separation would finally end. The doors opened and William stepped through, looking tired but radiant with joy at the sight of his family. For a moment, no one moved, as if they couldn't quite believe the waiting was over. Charlotte broke free from the group and ran to her father, launching herself into his arms with a squeal of delight. The others followed immediately, George trying to maintain his dignity while still hurrying to embrace his father, and Louis reaching out from Catherine's arms with excited babbling. But it was the moment when William's eyes met Catherine's over their children's heads that felt most significant. 3.5 months of separation, countless letters and video calls, sleepless nights and challenging days, all dissolved in that single look of recognition and love. "Welcome home," Catherine said simply. And William's smile was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Their family was whole again, changed by the experience of separation, but strengthened by the proof of their enduring love. The farewell had tested them, but it had also revealed the unbreakable bonds that would carry them through any challenge life might bring as they moved together into the palace. Surrounded by the chatter of excited children and the warmth of reunion, Catherine knew that this homecoming was not just an ending, but a beginning. The start of a new chapter built on the foundation of love that had sustained them through their longest goodbye.